The morning sky hung heavy with gray clouds as Eleanor Washington stepped out of her car. "I won't be long, Robert," she told her driver with a gentle smile. "Wait here, please." Robert nodded respectfully. "Of course, Ms. Washington. Should I bring the umbrella? Looks like rain." Eleanor shook her head. "A little rain never hurt nobody." Her voice carried the soft hints of her southern upbringing, something 78 years of life hadn't washed away. She preferred to walk the last block to Luminance, the high-end boutique her company had just bought. Eleanor had always believed in seeing things with her own eyes. No reports or second-hand stories could tell her what she needed to know about a business like experiencing it as a regular customer would. The first drops of rain began to fall as Eleanor made her way down the busy Manhattan street. People rushed past her, younger folks with their eyes glued to phones, businessmen and women hurrying to meetings. Nobody paid much attention to the elderly black woman in her simple beige coat and comfortable shoes. That's exactly how Eleanor liked it. Being invisible sometimes had its advantages. She paused outside the gleaming storefront of Luminance. The window display showcased handbags that cost more than what most people earned in a month. Crystal chandeliers hung inside, casting sparkles across polished marble floors. Eleanor took a deep breath and straightened her back. Despite building a fashion empire worth billions, she still felt the ghost of her younger self, the girl who'd been told to use the back entrance and not touch the merchandise. Times have changed, she whispered to herself, a personal ritual before these undercover visits. As Eleanor pushed through the heavy glass door, a small bell chimed. The scent of expensive leather and perfume filled the air. 3 salespeople stood chatting near the counter, all of them young, slim, and dressed in black. A handful of customers browsed the store, 2 young women giggling over a display of jewelry, a middle-aged man examining watches, and a couple being shown a collection of designer shoes. Not one of the staff looked up when Eleanor entered. She removed her slightly damp coat and folded it over her arm, then began to wander through the displays of luxury goods. Her eyes, still sharp despite her age, noticed everything. The thin layer of dust on a top shelf, a misaligned display of scarves, the slightly scuffed corner of the checkout counter. Small details that most would miss, but which told Eleanor volumes about how the store was run. She ran her fingers over a buttery soft leather handbag, admiring the stitching. The price tag dangled from its handle, $12,480. Eleanor almost chuckled. She remembered when that amount of money would have fed her entire neighborhood for months. Life sure is something, she thought, reflecting on her journey, from picking cotton as a child to owning one of the largest luxury goods companies in the world. Her grandmother had taught her to sew on an old machine with a foot pedal, making dresses from flour sacks. Now her designs graced red carpets and magazine covers. Eleanor moved toward a display of silk scarves, her favorite accessory. She built her first successful business selling handmade scarves on street corners. A young woman with sleek hair and perfect makeup stood nearby, helping a customer who was trying on diamond bracelets. The saleswoman's eyes flicked toward Eleanor briefly before returning to her client, dismissing the elderly woman as unimportant. If only they knew who was really walking among them today. Eleanor had purposely worn her plainest clothes, no designer labels, no flashy jewelry, nothing that would give away her status. Her only concession to luxury was her watch, a vintage piece that had been a gift from her late husband on their 50th anniversary. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows. Eleanor continued her quiet inspection of the store, mentally taking notes on what would need to change now that Luminance belonged to Washington Luxury Group. She wasn't here to catch people doing wrong. She was here to understand the true character of what she'd purchased. Was this a place that treated all people with dignity? Did they value only the wealthy and well-dressed? What kind of culture had taken root here? As Eleanor reached for a particularly beautiful emerald green scarf, she could feel eyes on her back. She smiled to herself. The real test was about to begin. Eleanor held the emerald green scarf in her hands, appreciating how the silk caught the light. 78 years on this earth had taught her to recognize quality, and this piece was exceptional. She smiled to herself, thinking it would make a lovely gift for her granddaughter's upcoming graduation. 20 minutes had passed since she entered Luminance, and not a single staff member had approached her. Meanwhile, a younger woman in designer clothes had walked in just 5 minutes ago and already had 2 salespeople fussing over her, offering champagne and private viewing of items just arrived from Paris. Eleanor moved toward the handbag display again, her interest genuine. The craftsmanship was worth examining closely. She reached for a classic black leather bag with gold hardware. "Can I help you find something?" The voice was cool, clipped. Eleanor turned to see a young saleswoman, her name tag read Vanessa, standing with arms crossed, eyebrows slightly raised. "Yes, I'd like to see this bag, please," Eleanor said, pointing to the one she'd been admiring. Vanessa flicked her eyes over Eleanor's simple clothes, her comfortable shoes now slightly damp from the rain. Something in her expression shifted, a slight hardening around the mouth. "That's $12,000, she said, emphasizing the price as if saying a foreign word very slowly to someone who wouldn't understand. "Perhaps something in our sale section would be more appropriate. We have some items from last season at 30% off." Eleanor smiled politely. "I'd still like to see this one, if you don't mind." With obvious reluctance, Vanessa took the bag down and handed it to Eleanor, then stepped back as if to keep watch. Eleanor opened the bag, examining the interior pockets and the quality of the lining. She'd started her company sewing handbags at her kitchen table, and old habits died hard. Her fingers tested the stitching, found it satisfactory. "This is lovely work." "Who's the designer?" Eleanor asked. Vanessa's phone chimed. She glanced at it, then back at Eleanor with thinly veiled impatience. "It's our signature Luminance collection, very exclusive." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "And these stitches here? Hand-sewn or machine?" "Hand-stitched by artisans in Italy," Vanessa replied automatically, though her tone suggested she doubted Eleanor knew the difference. Her attention had already drifted to a well-dressed couple who had just entered the store. "I'd like to see that one too," Eleanor said, pointing to another bag on a higher shelf. "Really?" Vanessa didn't bother hiding her skepticism. "That one's $18,000. "Yes, really," Eleanor said, her voice still kind but firm. With a small sigh, Vanessa reached for a step stool and brought down the bag. She handed it to Eleanor without a word, then stepped away slightly, making eye contact with another salesperson across the room. They exchanged knowing looks. Eleanor pretended not to notice as she examined the second bag. She could hear Vanessa whispering to a colleague who had wandered over, "She's just wasting time, probably sheltering from the rain." The other salesperson snickered quietly. "Mrs. Jenkins called. She's coming in to pick up her order at noon. Should we get the champagne ready?" Eleanor continued her inspection, unbothered. She'd faced much worse than whispering sales staff in her lifetime. The first time she tried to open a business account at a bank in 1968, the manager had laughed in her face. When she'd attempted to lease space for her first proper shop in 1972, the landlord had suddenly claimed it was already rented when he saw her in person. Funny how the place remained empty for 6 more months after that. A tall man in an expensive suit emerged from the back office. He scanned the store, his gaze stopping briefly on Eleanor before moving to the wealthy-looking couple being assisted near the jewelry counter. He nodded approvingly at the saleswoman helping them, then turned his attention back to Eleanor and frowned slightly. He approached Vanessa and spoke quietly. "Everything all right here?" "Yes, Mr. Reynolds, just showing some merchandise," Vanessa replied with a meaningful look. Mr. Reynolds, clearly the manager based on how the other staff straightened up when he appeared, turned to Eleanor with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Finding everything okay, ma'am?" His tone was polite on the surface, but carried an undercurrent that Eleanor recognized all too well. "I'm interested in these bags," Eleanor said. "They're quite beautiful. I'd also like to see that scarf collection." Mr. Reynolds and Vanessa exchanged glances. "Perhaps I can help you find something more." He paused, eyes flicking to her worn shoes, "Suitable for your needs." Eleanor smiled. "These suit my needs just fine." "I'd like to see the scarves now, please." Throughout her long career, Eleanor had learned when to fight and when to observe. Today was for observing. Every dismissive glance, every condescending word was being carefully noted. Not for revenge. Eleanor had never been interested in that, but for understanding exactly what needed to change. The rain continued to drum against the windows as Eleanor waited to see what would happen next. The tension in the air grew thicker as Mr. Reynolds stood with his arms crossed, watching Eleanor with poorly disguised impatience. Outside, the rain had picked up, drumming against the large display windows and sending occasional shoppers rushing past with umbrellas and newspapers held over their heads. "The scarves, please," Eleanor repeated gently, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Reynolds sighed. "Vanessa, show the lady our basic scarf collection." He emphasized the word basic with a slight curl of his lip. Vanessa led Eleanor to a small display near the back of the store. Unlike the front showcases spotlighted with special lighting, this area was dimly lit and tucked away beside a door marked "Staff Only." "These start at $300, Vanessa said flatly. Eleanor touched a blue silk scarf with gold threading along the edges. "And the emerald one I was looking at earlier? The one in the main display?" Vanessa's phone buzzed again. She checked it quickly. "That's from our premium collection, $900. "I'd like to see it, please." With a barely concealed eye roll, Vanessa walked away to retrieve the scarf. While waiting, Eleanor noticed how other customers were being treated. A young woman trying on sunglasses was offered coffee. A middle-aged man looking at wallets had two salespeople showing him different styles, describing the leather quality in enthusiastic detail. The contrast was impossible to miss, but it wasn't anything new to Eleanor. She'd experienced this kind of treatment her entire life, even after becoming successful. The only difference was that now, at 78, she found it more sad than infuriating. Some things changed too slowly in this world. Vanessa returned with the emerald scarf and practically dropped it into Eleanor's outstretched hands. "Will there be anything else?" she asked, already half-turned toward the door as a group of well-dressed women entered the store. "Yes, actually," Eleanor said. "I'd like to speak with the owner." Vanessa actually laughed at this, a short, sharp sound. "The owner doesn't come to the store, ma'am." "Perhaps the manager again, then?" Eleanor folded the scarf carefully. Vanessa's smile disappeared. She glanced toward Mr. Reynolds, who was now greeting the group of new customers with a warmth he hadn't shown Eleanor. "He's busy with customers." "I am a customer," Eleanor said simply. Something in her tone must have caught Vanessa off guard because she blinked several times before responding. "I'll see if he's available." As Vanessa walked away, Eleanor continued examining the scarves. She picked up a cream-colored one with delicate embroidery along the border. The craftsmanship reminded her of her early days, when she'd sit up late into the night sewing by hand because she couldn't afford a machine. Her fingers had bled sometimes, but she'd never missed a deadline. Lost in thought, she didn't notice Mr. Reynolds approaching until he cleared his throat loudly. "Is there a problem?" His voice had lost any pretense of politeness. "No problem," Eleanor said. "I'm interested in purchasing several items and had some questions about the company." Mr. Reynolds checked his watch pointedly. "Our staff can handle standard purchases." "I don't mean to be rude, but we have customers waiting who are actually going to make significant purchases today." He gestured toward the group of women who were being shown jewelry. A few other shoppers had turned to watch the interaction. An older white couple exchanged glances. A young man paused while trying on a watch. "I understand," Eleanor said, her voice still steady. "But I believe I've been quite clear about my intention to purchase. I'm curious why you've decided I won't be making a significant purchase." Mr. Reynolds' face flushed slightly. "Ma'am, we've been in this business a long time. We can usually tell." "Tell what, exactly?" Eleanor asked. The store had grown quieter. Even the soft background music seemed to have faded. "Look," Mr. Reynolds said, lowering his voice but not enough, "we serve a particular clientele here. The items you're looking at represent significant investments. The scarf you're holding costs more than some people's monthly rent." Eleanor smiled. "I'm well aware of its value, young man." "Then you understand why we need to focus our attention on serious buyers," he said, gesturing toward her simple clothing, her practical shoes now spotted with rain. "Perhaps our outlet location would be more appropriate for your budget constraints." A few gasps came from nearby customers. Someone whispered, "Did he really just say that?" "I see," Eleanor said, still holding the scarf. "And you've determined my budget how, exactly?" Mr. Reynolds' patience was clearly wearing thin. Ma'am, we're very busy. Unless you're ready to make a purchase right now, I'm going to have to ask you to make room for other customers. Eleanor looked him directly in the eyes. I'd like to speak to the owner. Mr. Reynolds actually laughed now, no longer bothering to hide his disdain. The owner doesn't deal with customer service issues. His eyes flicked over Eleanor's appearance once more. Now, if you'll excuse me. He took a step forward, clearly intending to escort her toward the exit. Several customers were watching openly now, some with discomfort, others with barely concealed smirks. It was at this precise moment that the front door opened again. The front door swung open, letting in a gust of rain-scented air. A well-dressed man in his early 40s rushed in, shaking water from his umbrella. He wore a tailored gray suit and carried a sleek leather portfolio under his arm. His eyes scanned the store quickly until they landed on Eleanor. "Ms. Washington," he called out, hurrying toward her. "I'm so sorry I'm late. The traffic is awful because of the rain." Mr. Reynolds and Vanessa exchanged confused glances. The store had gone completely silent. "That's quite all right, Javier," Eleanor said calmly, as though she hadn't just been on the verge of being escorted out. "You're right on time, actually." Javier reached her side, slightly out of breath. "I have all the documents ready for your signature. The acquisition was finalized this morning, just as you requested." He handed her the leather portfolio. "The board is absolutely thrilled with your purchase of the Luminance chain. They're eager to hear your plans for the brand's revitalization." The color drained from Mr. Reynolds' face. Vanessa's mouth fell open slightly. "Thank you, Javier," Eleanor said, accepting the portfolio. She turned to Mr. Reynolds with a gentle smile. "I believe you wanted to discuss who the owner is." Mr. Reynolds swallowed hard. "You're Eleanor Washington," she said, extending her hand. "Founder and CEO of Washington Luxury Group. As of this morning, the new owner of Luminance and its parent company." For a moment, no one moved. The silence in the store was so complete you could hear the rain drumming against the windows. Then whispers broke out among the customers. A few pulled out phones, clearly recognizing the name. "But you're..." Mr. Reynolds couldn't seem to finish his sentence. "Not what you expected." Eleanor finished for him, her voice still kind but with an edge of steel beneath it. "I found that's often the case, Mr. Reynolds." Javier, who had been watching the exchange with growing understanding, cleared his throat. "Ms. Washington prefers to visit new acquisitions incognito. It gives her a more authentic understanding of the business. And I've certainly gained that today," Eleanor said. Vanessa had backed away slightly, her face flushed with embarrassment. The other salespeople stood frozen in place, watching the scene unfold with expressions ranging from shock to horror. Mr. Reynolds finally found his voice. "Ms. Washington, I can explain." Eleanor held up a hand. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private. Is there an office we can use?" She emphasized the word "we" slightly, making it clear she meant herself and Javier, not Mr. Reynolds. "Of course," Mr. Reynolds stammered. "My office, your office, is just this way." He gestured toward the back of the store. "Thank you," Eleanor said. She turned to Vanessa, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "I'll take these items as well." She handed over the emerald scarf and the 2 handbags she had been examining. Vanessa took them with trembling hands. "Right away, Ms. Washington." As Eleanor and Javier followed Mr. Reynolds toward the back office, customers began talking excitedly among themselves. One woman was tapping rapidly on her phone, likely sharing the story on social media. An older gentleman nodded approvingly at Eleanor as she passed. "This is going to be all over the internet by lunchtime," Javier murmured to Eleanor as they walked. "That's not why I'm here," she replied quietly. Inside the office, Mr. Reynolds closed the door behind them, his hands visibly shaking. The room was small but elegantly decorated, with a large desk and plush chairs. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the chairs across from the desk. Then, seeming to realize his mistake, he quickly added, "Or would you prefer to sit at the desk? It's your office now, after all." Eleanor waved away the suggestion. "This is fine for now." She sat down, placing the leather portfolio on her lap. Javier took the seat beside her. Mr. Reynolds remained standing, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Ms. Washington, about what happened out there, I had no idea who you were." That's precisely the problem, isn't it? Elena said, her voice soft but firm. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with dignity. Sweat beaded on Mr. Reynolds' forehead. Of course, you're absolutely right. It was inexcusable. If you want my resignation. Is that what you think this is about? Eleanor asked. Firing people? Mr. Reynolds blinked in confusion. I just assumed. Eleanor shared a knowing look with Gavier before turning back to Mr. Reynolds. Young man, I didn't build a business empire by being impulsive or vindictive. I did it by recognizing problems and fixing them. For the first time since the revelation, a tiny spark of hope appeared in Mr. Reynolds' eyes. We have a lot to discuss, Eleanor said, opening the portfolio, about the future of luminance and the changes that need to be made. Outside the office, the store buzzed with excited conversation as customers and staff alike processed what they had just witnessed. Mr. Reynolds' office suddenly felt too small, too warm. He tugged at his collar as Eleanor studied him with calm, knowing eyes. The rain continued to drum against the window behind the desk, creating a steady backdrop to the tension in the room. I'd like to speak with all of your staff, Eleanor said after a moment of silence. Can you gather everyone in 15 minutes? Everyone? Mr. Reynolds asked, his voice cracking slightly. Even those who weren't present during our interaction. Everyone, Eleanor confirmed. This isn't just about what happened today. Mr. Reynolds nodded quickly. Of course, Ms. Washington, right away. He hurried out of the office, closing the door behind him. Once alone with Javier, Eleanor let out a long breath and leaned back in her chair. That bad? Javier asked softly. Worst, Eleanor replied. The way they treated me. She shook her head. It's not just that they were rude to an old woman. It's that they've created a culture where people are valued based on appearance. That's not luxury. That's just snobbery dressed up in expensive clothing. Gavier nodded, making notes in his tablet. What's your plan? Elena smiled slightly. The same plan I've had for 60 years, Javier. Change things for the better, one step at a time. While they waited, Javier reviewed the final acquisition papers with Eleanor. Washington Luxury Group had purchased Luminance and its parent company, Crystal Holdings, for a sum that would have seemed impossible to the young Eleanor who once sold handmade scarves door to door. A soft knock on the door interrupted their discussion. Mr. Reynolds peeked in. Everyone's gathered in the showroom, Ms. Washington. Thank you, Eleanor said, standing up slowly. At 78, her knees weren't what they used to be, but she still carried herself with the straight-backed dignity that had become her trademark in the business world. When she entered the showroom, 20 staff members stood in a nervous cluster. Some wore expressions of open fear, others looked confused, and a few, including Vanessa, couldn't meet her eyes. Elena noticed that Mr. Reynolds had asked the customers to leave. The closed for private event sign hung on the front door. Good afternoon, Eleanor began, her voice warm but authoritative. My name is Eleanor Washington. As you may have heard by now, Washington Luxury Group has acquired Luminance, effective this morning. A murmur ran through the group. One young man in the back whispered something to his colleague. Eleanor waited for silence before continuing. I came here today to experience this store as a customer would, to understand what we've purchased, not just the inventory and the brand name, but the spirit of the place. She paused, looking around at each face. What I experienced was disappointing, to say the least. Several staff members looked down at their feet. Vanessa was blinking rapidly, fighting back tears. I could stand here and tell you about my company's policies on customer service. I could lecture you on treating everyone with respect, regardless of how they're dressed or what you assume about their bank accounts. Elena shook her head. But I think it would be more valuable if I shared something personal instead. She moved to the center of the room, where she could see everyone clearly. I grew up in Alabama during segregation, she said. My grandmother was a seamstress who worked for wealthy white families. She taught me how to sew when I was 6 years old. By 12, I was making dresses alongside her. Elena smiled at the memory. She used to tell me, "Baby, your hands can create beauty that makes people forget the color of your skin, at least for a little while." The room was completely silent now. Even the rain seemed to have quieted. When I was 19, I tried to shop at a luxury department store in Birmingham. I'd saved for months to buy a special dress for my college graduation. I was turned away at the door. Her voice remained steady as she continued. The security guard told me, "Your kind shop's around back." I didn't understand what he meant until he directed me to a separate entrance for black customers where they sold damaged goods and last season's rejects. A few staff members exchanged uncomfortable glances. One older salesman closed his eyes as if in pain at the story. That day changed my life, Eleanor continued. I decided then that someday I would create beautiful things that everyone could experience with dignity. That true luxury isn't about exclusion, it's about exceptional quality paired with exceptional humanity. She turned specifically toward Mr. Reynolds and Vanessa. What happened today wasn't nearly as blatant as what I experienced in 1965. It was more subtle, more polite on the surface. But the message was the same: you don't belong here. Ms. Washington, Mr. Reynolds began, his voice strained. I cannot apologize enough. Eleanor held up her hand. I'm not interested in apologies that come only after you discover who I am. She looked around the room again. I'm interested in change. A heavy silence hung in the room after Eleanor's words. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and weak sunlight was beginning to filter through the clouds and into the store. I'm interested in change, Eleanor repeated, her voice gentle but firm. Real change. Not just in how you act when the boss is watching, but in how you think about what luxury truly means. She moved toward a display of handbags, the same ones she had been examining earlier. Who can tell me what makes these bags special? She asked. The staff exchanged confused glances. Finally, one young man raised his hand hesitantly. They're made with the finest Italian leather, he offered, hand-stitched by master craftsmen who've been doing this for generations. Eleanor nodded. That's right. And what else? The hardware is gold-plated, Vanessa said quietly. The design is exclusive to luminance. Good, Eleanor said. These are beautiful objects, crafted with skill and care. They represent the best of what human hands can create. She picked up one of the bags, running her fingers over the stitching. But do you know what doesn't make them special? Who buys them? She looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. A beautiful object remains beautiful whether it's purchased by a celebrity or a teacher who saved for years, or an old woman in rain-spotted shoes. She smiled slightly. The craftsmanship doesn't change based on who's holding it. So why should your treatment of people change? A few staff members nodded slowly. Others still looked uncomfortable, uncertain where this was heading. I've been in this business for 60 years, Eleanor continued. I've seen luxury brands rise and fall. The ones that last understand something important. Exclusivity based on quality is sustainable. Exclusivity based on snobbery is not. She placed the bag back on its display stand and walked to the center of the room again. Now, I imagine many of you are wondering what happens next. She looked at Mr. Reynolds, whose forehead was still damp with nervous sweat. You're wondering if you'll have jobs tomorrow. Several people shifted anxiously. One young woman in the back was visibly trembling. I didn't build Washington Luxury Group by firing people at the first mistake, Eleanor said. I built it by recognizing when something is broken and finding ways to fix it. What's broken here isn't just individual behavior, it's the culture. She gestured for Javier to join her. He stepped forward, tablet in hand. Starting next week, Luminance will be implementing a new training program, Eleanor announced. Every staff member, from management to new hires, will participate in workshops on inclusive customer service and recognizing unconscious bias. Mr. Reynolds nodded quickly. Of course, Ms. Washington, whatever you think is best. I'm not finished, Eleanor said calmly. In addition, we'll be launching a mentorship program with design schools in underserved communities. Each of you will be paired with a student who will shadow you, learning the business from the inside. This caused a stir among the staff. Some looked intrigued, others uncertain. These young people might not look like your typical luxury customers, Eleanor continued. They might speak differently or dress differently, but they represent the future of design and the future of this industry. You'll learn as much from them as they will from you. She turned to Vanessa, who had been staring at the floor. Young lady. Vanessa looked up, her eyes wide with apprehension. You'll be working directly with me on a special project, Eleanor said. I need someone who understands what luminance has been to help shape what it can become. Confusion replaced fear on Vanessa's face. You want me to work with you? After how I treated you? Elena nodded. Sometimes the people who need to learn the most are exactly the ones who should be teaching others once they've learned their lesson. She smiled slightly. Besides, you have excellent taste. You just need to expand your vision of who deserves to enjoy beautiful things. Elena addressed the whole group again. I don't expect perfection. I don't even expect immediate understanding. What I expect is willingness to grow and change. She walked toward one of the front windows, looking out at the street where pedestrians were emerging now that the rain had stopped. When I started my first shop, no bank would give me a loan, she said, almost to herself. No fashion magazine would feature my designs. I was told again and again that luxury wasn't for people like me, neither as a creator nor as a customer. She turned back to face the staff. I proved them wrong by creating something that couldn't be ignored, by making beauty that transcended prejudice. Her voice strengthened. That's the legacy I want for every business under the Washington Luxury Group umbrella, including luminance. Not just beautiful things, but a beautiful way of being in the world. A few staff members were nodding now, some with genuine interest rather than just fear. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9, Elena said. I'd like each of you to come prepared to share one idea for how we can make this store more welcoming to all customers without compromising our commitment to quality. She nodded to Javier, who stepped forward. That's all for today, he said. You're dismissed. 6 months had passed since that rainy day when Eleanor Washington had walked into Luminance as a seemingly ordinary customer and walked out as its revealed owner. Today, she returned to the store, but this time her car pulled up directly in front, and her arrival was expected. The summer sun shone brightly as Eleanor stepped out of her car, dressed in a stylish blue suit with a familiar emerald green scarf draped elegantly around her neck. Robert, her faithful driver, smiled as he held the door. Will you be long today, Ms. Washington? He asked. A couple of hours, I think, she replied. The quarterly review is today, and I want to see everything firsthand. As Elena approached the store, she paused to look at the window display. The mannequins had been carefully positioned to represent people of different ages and body types, each dressed in Luminance's latest collection. A sign in elegant script read, True luxury is for everyone who appreciates beauty. The door opened before she reached it. Mr. Reynolds stood there with a genuine smile. Good morning, Ms. Washington, he said, extending his hand. We've been looking forward to your visit. Elena shook his hand warmly. The change in him was remarkable, not just in how he treated her, but in his entire demeanor. The nervous, status-conscious manager had been replaced by a more confident, more authentic person. It's good to be back, Thomas, she said, using his first name as she now did with all her staff. How are things? See for yourself, he said, stepping aside to let her enter. The store had transformed. While still elegant and high-end, the atmosphere had completely changed. Gone was the cold exclusivity, replaced by a warm sophistication. Staff members moved through the space, helping customers of all backgrounds. An elderly couple was being shown watches by a young saleswoman who listened attentively to their needs. A teenager in casual clothes was examining designer sunglasses while a salesman explained the craftsmanship without a hint of condescension. Ms. Washington, a familiar voice called out. Vanessa hurried over, followed by a young man in his early 20s carrying a sketchbook. I'm so glad you're here. Dean has some amazing new designs to show you. The young man shyly extended his hand. It's an honor to meet you, Ms. Washington. Your mentorship program changed my life. Elena smiled, taking both his hand and the sketchbook he offered. I can't wait to see your work, Dean. Vanessa tells me you have a real gift. Vanessa, once so dismissive of Eleanor, now beamed with pride for her mentee. He's going to be a star designer someday. His understanding of how to blend traditional craftsmanship with modern sensibilities is incredible. As they walked through the store, Elena noticed countless small changes that added up to a complete transformation. The sales section was no longer tucked away in a back corner, but integrated throughout the store. Staff members wore name tags that included languages they spoke. A small sign near the register announced monthly workshops open to the public on topics like the art of leather crafting and sustainable luxury. In the back office, Thomas had prepared a presentation on the store's performance. As you can see, Ms. Washington, our sales have increased by 32% over the last 2 quarters, he said, pointing to a chart. Impressive, Eleanor nodded. And customer demographics. We've expanded our customer base significantly, he replied, flipping to the next slide. We're reaching people who never would have walked through our doors before. And here's the surprising part. Our highest-end items are selling better than ever. Eleanor smiled. Not surprising to me, Thomas. When you welcome everyone in to appreciate beauty, you discover that good taste isn't limited to one type of person. Later, as Eleanor toured the stockroom, she overheard a new employee being trained. The most important thing to remember, Vanessa was saying, is that we never judge customers by their appearance. Everyone deserves the same exceptional service. But how do we know who's actually going to buy something expensive? The trainee asked. We don't, Vanessa replied. And it doesn't matter. Our job is to share our passion for these beautiful items with everyone who walks through that door. The rest takes care of itself. Elena slipped away without interrupting, a smile on her face. Before leaving, she stopped to chat with a young black woman who was admiring the same handbag Elena had looked at on her first visit. It's beautiful, isn't it? Elena said. The woman nodded. I've been saving up for months. Today's the day I finally get to buy it. It's worth the wait, Eleanor replied. I have one myself. As she walked out into the sunshine, Eleanor thought about how much could change in just 6 months. The store had transformed, but more importantly, so had the people within it. Not through fear or force, but through a different vision of what luxury could be. Robert opened the car door for her. How was your visit, Ms. Washington? Eleanor looked back at the store one last time. Through the window, she could see Vanessa carefully wrapping the handbag for the young woman, treating the moment with the ceremony it deserved. It was perfect, Robert, she said. Absolutely perfect.